Hello, and welcome everyone to the Emancipated Citizen Podcast. I am Zachary, and with me is Benjamin Snow. We're coming to you with a special Christmas episode. If you've been listening to us for the past few years, first of all, thank you very much for that. And also, you would know that every year in the holiday season, we have a special Christmas episode where we discuss philosophy and human rights as it pertains to fictional worlds. And since I have noticed that some of you have criticized my characterization of the American and Western tradition as being somewhat idealized after my video and podcast, A Warning to the Free World. Here I thought I would like to critically dissect two different manifestations of the American tradition, American exceptionalism and the myth of the self-made man, and that will be through the lens of a political work of art. Speaking, of course, about the BioShock game series, I will be focusing mainly on the original BioShock and also BioShock Infinite. And if you guys have not played those games and don't know much about the storylines, I will tell you right now there will be plenty of spoilers as to the timeline and the development. The games are structured in such a way that you don't start out with a lot of information, and the picture really starts to come together towards the end. So if you would like to play it for yourself first or something like that, then maybe save this one for later. Otherwise, I really hope you enjoy the show. So for a little bit of background on the world of BioShock, let's start the chronology here. In the year 1876, a man named Booker DeWitt is born. In the late 1890s, he is a soldier in the American Army. He finds himself being led in Wounded Knee in a conflict with Native American peoples. As a soldier partaking in a military effort to subdue Native American communities, Booker's loyalties are questioned due to his partially Native ancestry. So Booker proves himself by committing a massacre against Native civilians, an act that in the course of the story will follow him for the remainder of his life, setting off a journey of redemption and self-discovery. So Booker considers the idea of getting baptized, almost does it, but instead decides not to, as apparently he thinks his sins are unforgivable. He descends into gambling addiction and massive debt. The thing with the baptism will be very important for later, so to keep that in mind. Booker has a daughter, and a scientist opens a gateway from a parallel universe and makes an offer to pay off his debts in exchange for basically selling off his daughter. He agrees to that. She's taken away, but he immediately regrets that. He attempts to take her back, but with no success. Later on, more mysterious figures appear, apparently from alternate dimensions, and they offer to help him save his daughter. Booker loses most of his memories through the process of jumping dimensions, and having little more than a picture of Emily and a memory of the phrase, "Give us the girl and your debt will be forgiven," he embarks on a mission to abduct the heir to Columbia, having a vague notion that he is on a mission to kidnap the heir so that his debt would be forgiven, which is if you've been paying attention to the actual details, is kind of a conflation and a confused kind of impression of what he's actually doing. Nonetheless, his mission is to get Emily from the tower in which the leader of the society has trapped her in because, as it turns out, she has special dimension jumping powers herself, which she doesn't control that well in the beginning. Over the development of the story, Emily's character develops, her willpower develops more, and she comes to control those things, which given the character of Zachary Comstock, as basically a prophetic figure and a prolific misogynist and racist, it does form the basis for kind of an arc of self-discovery and liberation for Emily as well. And yeah, it is something that has been written about quite extensively, actually. The kind of analysis of that kind of liberation that Emily goes through. We might touch on that. The game takes place in a place called Columbia, which is a city that is floating in the sky, led by this kind of cult leader, Zachary Hale Comstock. He professes to talk to God. He prophesies things. He worked with scientists to develop this levitation technology so that Rapture can secede from the United States by literally rising up to the sky. That was after interfering in the Boxer Rebellion in China, and having conflicts with the federal government as a result. And their ideology is something of a mixture of traditional Christianity, American exceptionalism, racism.
Think it's worth mentioning who the real life Comstock was? Because he was...
Yeah,
real life Comstock was so much more annoying than game Comstock.
Yeah. Yeah, do go on.
Yeah, the real life Comstock, he'd lived in around the same time as these events. He was a soldier in the U.S. Civil War, and everyone hated him from the age of 19. Everyone who knew him hated him. Soldiers would be given whiskey rations. He didn't drink. He poured his out. After all the work of bringing it to him on the front, he'd pour it out rather than sharing it with his comrades, which, that I would do as a non-drinker. Well, seldom drinker. I probably would share it out to whoever needed it or, trade it or something, but he just poured it out on the ground. And after he finished annoying other soldiers, he wanted to make a more prudish culture in the U.S., and eventually got himself nominated as Postmaster General, and stopped quote-unquote obscene materials from being shipped through the mail. Often, this was sex education, so it's telling people how to not get pregnant. And, this was the time the U.S. was growing. Sure, need more people. There also were huge problems with street children. So, yeah. Way to go. Theocrats. Give us more street children. Make the world full of children that no one's taking care of. And Comstock, he also would confiscate lewd photos from saloons because that's totally his business. Confiscated what he called abortifacients, but either helping women get abortions or just anything stopping them from getting pregnant. And he bragged about driving dozens of people to suicide by doing this. So yes, theocrats.
Yeah,
their morality is something else.
Yeah, I also heard that he used to write to doctors asking for advice on using contraceptives, and then having the doctors arrested for giving him medically correct information about the topic that he was asking about.
Sounds about right.
So yeah, he's a very nasty figure, obviously, and and seemingly having a lot in common with the prophet Zachary Hale Comstock. Um, I would say that the prophet Comstock, something of a combination of the historical. What's his first name? It's not Zachary. He has another first name.
Anthony, after whom the
Yeah.
Comstock Act of 1873 is named.
So my understanding of the prophet Zachary Hale Comstock is as being a combination of the historical Anthony Comstock and Joseph Smith. Because actually his the religion that he founded does sound very similar to Mormonism. First of all, you have the Christian basis. You have the history of massacres against Native Americans. You have the heresies that those figures added to the religion, which other Christians would find very heretical. In Comstock's case, came to something of a deification of the founding fathers. They talk about Father Washington and Father Franklin and that kind of thing. They consider themselves to be the true continuation of the vision of the founding fathers, a pure originalist version of what the United States was supposed to be. And of course, considering the real United States to be a fallen Sodom, as they describe it.
Makes perfect sense if you don't know anything about any of the founders as people.
Yeah, they basically get transformed into those cultic figures. Another parallel, of course, with Mormonism is the theologically enshrined racism that the religion of Comstock enforced. One of the first scenes in the game is of essentially the stoning of an interracial couple, which was quite disturbing.
Which actually doesn't sound too much like Mormons. If anything, the Mormon racism appears to have had. I mean, maybe Joseph Smith was a little bit involved, but it appears to be more Brigham Young than Joseph Smith who was responsible.
Well, possibly. It all ties in with this Christian nationalism and the American exceptionalism, the merger of the two, and the essentially, synthesizing a new religion out of American identity and Christianity. And it has to be said in this context that part of the American tradition and American identity is ideological racism, or has been for a long time. And I mean, as I said, if you have looked through the Warning to the Free World, especially the beginning parts, I think the Western and American tradition especially are very complex. There are aspects of it that have ideals that are very, very much worth striving for. But I think it's important to also recognize that, the history, for example, the Mormon myth that black skin was originally a curse from God, the exclusion of black people from church leadership and even temple ceremonies, which, as I understand, is necessary for salvation in Mormon theology, that kind of thing is, it derives more from American civil religion than it does from Christianity. And yeah, I mean, you also can say that that the tradition is purely racist. It's a very complex tradition. You look at a lot of the stances of the founding fathers towards race and slavery and that kind of thing. Um, a number of them seem to have kind of the attitude that it was kind of out the door anyway, and yes, it does need to be abolished at some point. Um, Others were more happy with it, others were more radically against it. There was kind of a diversity of opinions when it came to that specific issue.
Yeah.
Um,
Including slave owning founders. A lot of them thought slavery was a bad thing.
yes.
Probably also worth mentioning that Jefferson and Washington didn't own many slaves in their own right, but their wives did.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Uh, yeah, so it is certainly anything but simple. And to say that that the American ethos in this sense is purely racist or purely anti-racist is something of an oversimplification. But as I said, the development of America as a nation, especially the southern states, um, had had an ideology of racism and slavery as being a very integral part to this national identity. And so it only comes naturally that either we were talking about the emergence of religions in the real world, such as Mormonism, within this context, that this would be incorporated, or in when we have this kind of fictional dystopia led by a figure like that that this ideology would be expanded upon and enshrined more into law. Right.
And it's
I
probably
mean,
also worth mentioning a lot of Mormon teaching, anti-black racism and Mormonism, which, by the way, in the 1980s, they cut that part of the Book of Mormon. It's very nifty
yeah.
being able to change the scriptures when it's no longer convenient. But they also said a lot about how Native Americans used to be white, or there used to be some white, some not. The white ones were killed by the, ancestors of the Native Americans around at the time. Claimed that they'd had chariots and stuff, which, if there were chariots all over the Americas, archaeologists would have found them. There weren't. The last horses in North America died off at the end of the Ice Age. They weren't around until the Spanish brought them. There's a surprising number of people with a surprising different number of viewpoints who try to deny that, but finding a horse fossil in a time we don't expect is a good discovery.
I mean,
Archaeology people are very.
I'll tell you in all honesty, Ben, I am profoundly uninterested in debating in debating the historicity of mythology, essentially, right? I mean, people have their faith, people want to believe whatever they believe, and you'll see all kinds of people who will say the earth is flat because they interpreted the Bible a certain way, or will deny evolution because the way they literally interpreted the Bible or the Quran, or ridiculous claims about Native Americans. I don't think we're not sharing a common etymology. We're not sharing a common epistemology. We don't, somebody who thinks scientifically and somebody who bases their beliefs on faith. We're not, we're not reaching conclusions in the same way. And so in those discussions, oftentimes we're having, we're just talking past each other. What I find interesting about mythology, however, is how it reflects on human psychology, on the real world, on politics, on the intellectual traditions and those times and places, right? And I think it is very interesting that Mormons developed myths like that. And I mean, I will take it as a foregone conclusion that none of it is historical. Nonetheless, the myths themselves tell us a lot about the people who created them and believe in them to this day.
Yeah, but it is funny. Mormons create the story of genocide by the ancestors of modern-day Native Americans, and we're less genocidal towards them than much of American society at the time. Granted, they were expecting that Native Americans would convert to Mormonism, which they didn't, and that they would become white, which not how biology works. But it is interesting they had that idea too, isn't it?
Yes, it's interesting. It's also deeply disturbing if you think about it more. The idea that having a different skin color is essentially the result of corruption or being impure or a curse, and that being cleaner or being more spiritual or being more pure is going to alleviate this malformation. But granted, the racism of the Mormon Church is not quite as extreme, not quite as violent as that of the Comstock cult.
And did the Comstock cult? What was their view on polygamy?
I don't think they practice polygamy. I mean, as far as my understanding goes, Comstock had one wife whom he killed after she threatened to expose some internal secrets about how they got Emily. What they told the people of Columbia was that she was pregnant with her for like 9 days, and she was something of a miracle child. Of course, as we know, she came to Columbia by ways of interdimensional travel, and so she might be genetically related to. We'll get to that part. So the reason that I guess I've given enough spoilers that there's no point in holding out on this bit of information. The reason that Comstock had Emily taken from Booker DeWitt is because Comstock lost his fertility through the repeated exposure to the terrors in the fabric of the universe and the portals to other parallel universes. He also aged more rapidly as a result of that. So yeah, he wasn't able to biologically have children. But then he found another version of himself in a parallel universe where he was down on his luck, massively in debt, and very desperate. And so he basically took advantage of an alternate version of himself and bought off his own daughter from another universe. And so, yeah, it is revealed that Booker DeWitt and Comstock are actually the same person from different realities.
Oh dear. Careful who you tell that to, or we're going to have another billionaire having a clone trying to get interdimensional travel to build their own clone army that way.
Yeah. Gotta be careful with that, yeah. Which actually raises an interesting question that is something of a common theme within BioShock Infinite. And when it comes to alternate universes, time travel, if you have different versions of yourself, if you take advantage of a version of yourself in another universe, you harm a different version of yourself. Are you just acting upon yourself, or are you acting upon a different person, right? Also, there are questions about well, when Booker goes to Columbia and experiences all of that and eventually realizes the truth about all of this, well, what degree of moral responsibility does he have for the actions of Comstock? And then, of course, at the very end, here's another major plot point. So those interdimensional creatures that helped Booker go to Columbia to rescue his daughter did so because they essentially knew that Emily would end up taking the throne of Columbia, and with her powers later on starting a war against the United States, the surface world, and creating massive destruction. So the idea was if Booker was able to jump the dimensions and take his daughter back, then that might be prevented. Thing is, in all realities, as it turns out, there's a divergence at that point where he decides either to get baptized and become the prophet eventually, or not to get baptized and go on the path of Booker DeWitt. They come in pairs, basically, that forms of the alternate universes, and so the only way to prevent this whole mess from happening was essentially for the Emilys from all of the different universes to go to the point of divergence where Booker decides either to get baptized or not and drown him, so that he never makes the decision of either yes or no, and so all of those timelines collapse, and so history is rewritten in that way, and Emily never exists. So this is another fascinating consideration when it comes to the nature of moral responsibility, right? Booker, at that point, he, as we know, he had committed a massacre, so you can say he's guilty and kind of deserves punishment in some way, but can he be held responsible for what he might do in the future? So it's like this whole question about killing baby Hitler, or that kind of thing, right?
Yeah. Well, first of all,
yeah.
I assume he was ordered to commit a massacre.
Well, as the story goes, he took more initiative because his loyalties were being questioned, and he was thought to have sympathies for the Native Americans because he has partial Native American descent. So it is implied that there was some degree of agency in doing what he did.
Yeah, which funny that happened now that every single white person in the U.S. claims to have Native American ancestry. And Trump specifically claimed, despite his family tree being easy to trace back to Europe, and all his ancestors came from there, claimed to have more Native American ancestry than a lot of children on reservations because their casinos were competing with his or something. So yeah, another big thing there. It's just interesting in light of modern politics.
Okay, give me your take on this whole question of time travel and interdimensional moral responsibility.
Yeah. Well, in his specific case, I mean, obviously, when somebody chooses to kill someone else, they do have moral responsibility for it. But, and even more so multiple people, but when you're being constantly pressured, that is and with the implied threat of being killed yourself if you don't prove your loyalty, that is a different level of moral responsibility than killing somebody because you want to rob them.
Okay. Well, originally I wasn't asking about the Wounded Knee massacre. I was asking more about the kind of responsibility that carries over from what happened in the future in Rapture and the Comstock stuff with the point of baptism before that, and killing him before to prevent the future from happening, kind of thing. And of course the Emily part of it, of her being her existence essentially being erased because of the timelines she ends up being a tyrant. But nonetheless, what you said is quite interesting, and I think it is very relevant, and I also disagree. I think that I think it's been kind of established that following orders is not a valid defense for committing war crimes. It's not a valid defense for that kind of thing.
I'm not saying it's a defense of any charges. I'm just saying following orders with an implied threat of being killed yourself is a different level of responsibility than placing those orders in the first place. Both obviously deserve punishment.
Of course.
And it's amazing how often people giving the orders get off scot-free while the people following them get punished. That, I think, is the biggest travesty.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think that the January 6th insurrection is the best example of that. All of those people getting arrested and those at the top not getting anything, and at the end, really, nothing is being accomplished except, it's all optics, it's all performative, and the crime is not being deterred, and there's no point in the punishment at that point. So I don't think that following orders is a valid excuse, especially if you take into consideration that most American soldiers are not conscripted. So there is also an active choice that is being made in joining those forces, and one does need to give thought about what kind of orders might I receive in the future, what is realistic, what might I obey, what might I disobey, and what might I risk in disobeying an order that might be deeply troubling to me and go against my conscience. Those are very important questions, and I think it's one of the reasons why I don't think I can ever do any kind of military or intelligence or that kind of government job.
I was also, to be clear, speaking of moral responsibility, not legal responsibility. Legal responsibility, punishments as described by law. Moral responsibility is how we think about them in the past. For example, there were American soldiers that murdered SS prisoners. That was a crime. That is against the laws of war, but we're talking about SS people here. I don't think killing SS people in a concentration camp deserves the same amount of condemnation after the fact as killing civilians. Goodness knows, most of them probably they were in an SS camp. They should have been executed for that. Just, not on an ad hoc firing squad. Days later, it should have been trials and such first.
Well, sure. I mean, not every life is equal.
Yeah. And,
I think that's worth pointing out here.
Yeah.
Not every human life is equally valuable. Some generate more value for others. Some contribute more to society. Others take away more and cause more suffering. And I don't think. Well, I don't believe in the death penalty. I don't think that that we should kill people if it can be avoided at all, right? But of course, I mean, I will feel more of a loss if a great thinker or a doctor who works in war zones or something is killed than if somebody like, I don't know, a rapist is killed. No. Both shouldn't happen, but they're not of equal value. I think you're right about that.
Yeah, and specifically, as far as war crimes are concerned, a general ordering massacres of civilians, and a private carrying out the orders with an implied threat that something bad will happen to him if he doesn't,
Yeah.
which is an inherent part of being certainly in the Army, little less so in, the Air Force or the Navy. The general has a lot more moral responsibility than a private, especially a conscripted one.
An interesting point nonetheless, but you answered a question that I didn't ask regarding the massacre committed by DeWitt there. My question actually pertained to the moral responsibility um, that would traverse time and parallel universes, given that
I mean,
they would
it's.
exist. Like I mentioned, there is a lot of allusion to this um, to what kind of moral responsibility might Booker have for the actions of Comstock, or Comstock for the actions of Booker, and whether whether
I would.
killing Booker before he does certain crimes to prevent them from happening is a moral thing to do. Whether Emily's killing her father before he conceives her, thereby nullifying her own existence, is then a an act of suicide, and whether she can be killed in that way, or
Yeah.
whether it's not killing at all in that kind of circumstance. I mean, of course, it's all very yeah,
I mean, that's a
head in the
perfect. It's a
sky
case
kind of
example of a
abstract kind of.
grandfather paradox.
Yes. Yes. It is rather paradoxical if you think about it too deeply. But what do you think about the moral dimension of it? I think you get what I mean. Yeah,
Yeah.
the
I think
transversing of time and dimensions. Yeah.
I think if you're killing one person who has already committed a massacre, so he's an active multiple murderer, if not a mass murderer, to stop millions of people from dying, right? That's, first of all, it's not something that could realistically happen, but at some point, what is one life compared to millions? Even more so when it is somebody who has shown themselves willing to kill others themselves. If you're stopping from other people from dying because of their existence, it is a. If he hadn't been involved in massacres, it would be a tough question for sure. But ultimately, it's a hard thing to say. Many people need to die because this one person can't.
Okay. So
And
you're taking the
in this
teleological.
scenario, you can show him the future, show him what happens and I mean he's very poor. Show him what happens if he has a child, and give him a bunch of money to not have one. That's would have the same result without killing someone. Not as good of a story for a game, but also an option. Can jump him into the future a few decades, get a vasectomy, send him back, and give him some money for his trouble. Same result.
Yeah.
No one died.
Yeah. I mean, it wouldn't be as dramatic, but it would be funnier if the ending of BioShock Infinite, instead of Emily coming back in time to drown her father, it would be like she's coming back in time to just kick him really hard in the balls so they don't work anymore.
Don't be ridiculous. Bring a portable X-ray scanner and just point it at his balls for a long enough period of time, and problem solved.
So you're taking like a teleological approach towards this kind of dilemma, right? That sort of ends justify
Stand
the
over
means,
him
or
every night, and
yeah.
except of course X-rays don't make noise.
Okay. I'm sure you're familiar with the trolley problem, right?
Yes, that is more or less what I said.
So basically, you can take an active initiative to kill one person if that's gonna prevent the deaths of multiple others. Do you think that's does that reflect your conception of ethics here?
Yeah.
Or do you have more to add to it?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of this permutates into a lot of real world scenarios that are more likely to happen. Yes, I'd say if you let 5 people die instead of making a choice to kill one, you have a net 4 deaths on your hands. Not that we want to live in a world where a doctor can say, "Hey, I have 5 patients who need organ transplants, and we have one person in our waiting room who has a heart, lungs, a liver, and 2 kidneys." We don't want to live in that world either.
No, we don't.
But
I mean,
it also comes up to people who see buying insurance as gambling. When you're not buying insurance on stocks you don't own, that is gambling. But you live in a world with insurance. No matter what choice you make about buying insurance, you are gambling. Some people say calling excess dear is playing God. I say it's not. Playing God was removing the wolves, whether we hunt the deer or not, to control their population and reduce car collisions. By removing the predators, we played God. We are not playing God any more or less if we remove the deer. Or some of the deer.
Right? How removal and population control and hunting, that's a completely different conversation that we might have at a different time. But yeah, I mean when it comes to those kinds of moral dilemmas, I think there's I mean, the deeper you think about it and the more advanced you go in this kind of philosophy, you will see that the deontological kind of Kantian virtue ethics approach to ethics, and the like Bentham's more utilitarian approach, the more factors you add into what kind of exceptions and what kind of complex rules would get you to this sort of moral situation that you strive for, you will notice that those systems actually converge, and the differences are actually very theoretical on a basic level. I mean, I think that a sophisticated enough deontological approach that if you take Kant's approach of reducing actions to a maxim, and you take enough nuance within those maxims as to include all of the possible variables in the world of that situation, right? Then no two situations can be decided on the same maxim. On the other hand, when you're talking about teleological or utilitarian ethics, at a certain point you will have to acknowledge that the utilitarian calculus is not cannot be limited to individual actions. They need to be applied more broadly to stable rules. The enforcement and the existence of those rules ultimately forming cohesive and functional social structures. In essence, you take an advanced enough, like a sophisticated enough deontological approach, and it will have to at some point look at the consequences of the actions and thereby judge the kind of the drive for the action based on that, and the more nuanced you get with utilitarianism, the more rules you create and the more action-based your morality becomes, the morality-based. And so all of that to say it's all rather complex, and personally I think that on a fundamental level there is no such thing as an a priori moral truth, right? Moral truths are results of material conditions. Like moral states are essentially functions of material conditions, and so the basic concept of Kant's deontological approaches is unfounded, I think. As I said, it is possible to construct a sophisticated and functional system of ethics from many different starting points. After all, they are both essentially humanistic, which I think outperforms any myth-based or God-based system of morality. Yeah, moving away from the convoluted moral dilemmas, which we could discuss endlessly, but will not, because today we're talking about BioShock.
Do we want to talk about the original game?
Yes, I thought I would go chronologically. So Infinite chronologically takes place before BioShock the original, even though it was released after. Yeah. So
it's always interesting when they choose to put things in that order.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't mean like in Song of Ice and Fire, where they reference events in the past and then Martin writes a book about those events directly.
Yeah.
I mean, like when it's unconnected and the chronologically first one is made second is always an interesting choice.
Yeah. Although as we spoke about, timelines in this world are very intertwined in ways that something in the future can affect something in the past in ways that you wouldn't expect in most stories or the real world. And to your point about the original BioShock, this is actually relevant to the story of BioShock Infinite and the and first of all the work that Comstock did with some of his quantum scientists, which well worth noting is that those people are not Luddites. They're not like technology rejecting fundamentalist kind of thing. They very much embrace science and technology insofar as it serves their totalitarian political goals. You can think of them in that respect somewhat like the Nazis. I mean, especially in the sense that
I'd dispute that the Nazis' end goal was kill the Jews first because they think the conspiracies, whatever. Then they expel all the Slavs from Central and Eastern Europe and populate Central and Eastern Europe with German farmers, soldiers, and they planned on making a giant agrarian culture. So they kind of were Luddites. They were just willing to embrace high technology to achieve a Luddite aim.
Interesting take. Be that as it may.
Which makes the post-war plan to turn Germany into an agrarian culture extra ironic. The goal of that plan was the same as the Nazis' end goal.
Yes. Be that as it may, the Colombians actually, basically, they had something of a pantheon with the founding fathers and the Virgin Mary and that kind of thing, and Benjamin Franklin actually plays a role as something of a. He's not called that, but you can understand him taking the role of a sort of the god of science kind of thing.
So he was Imhotep from the Egyptian pantheon.
Huh. Yeah, you could say that. So through scientific advancements and research and the connections that Comstock had with a specific scientist who discovered this quantum levitation. Okay, please, let's just get past the pseudoscience. It's not, I don't think it's worth our time. Quantum levitation, which allowed the city to levitate. Another thing, of course, that this scientist, I'm blanking on her name, I'm sorry, discovered was the traversability of those parallel universes, which gave him more authority as a prophet, because through that he was able to, in some sense, see into the future and actually make accurate prophecies and that kind of thing. But as we mentioned, this had also profound health implications on Comstock himself. One of the projects that his scientists did was basically going to an alternate universe where a libertarian type ideologue built a city under the ocean and basically doing industrial espionage over there and stealing their technology and selling it as their own. So through that they developed plasmids, for example, in Columbia. Plasmids are essentially like drugs that introduce new genetic material to your body. So it can boost different things through genetic manipulation. It can boost intelligence, strength, can give you superpowers, all kinds of things. Of course, those drugs are also highly addictive, which we will circle back to. Go more into detail about Rapture and the development of Rapture and the godless ideology that they had, as opposed to the ideology that Comstock perpetuated, which in the end have very, very similar kind of outcomes.
Yeah.
So,
and I think ultimately any of these philosophies are going to run smack hard into the problem like a brick wall, that governments exist to do necessary tasks that individuals can't have trouble doing, whether it be mostly because of scale problems.
Mm-hmm.
So once you get rid of the existing government, you still need people to build the roads, fix the pipes and whatnot.
We'll get into that.
Guard whatever, and whether it's a theocrat trying to make a religious place where it's unnecessary, or a libertarian who wants the free market to do it, you're going to find neither one of them can do it. Neither religion nor free markets will do some. Will organize the defense in a competent manner.
Yeah. So chronologically, right now we are between the years 1910 and 1920, so at the beginning of the 20th century, right? Within that time, in a different reality, there emerges a young Russian man by the name of Andrei Ryanovsky, who, living through the 1917 Russian Revolution, fled the formation of the Soviet Union and the overtake of the Bolsheviks. He flees to America, renaming himself Andrew Ryan, with a burning hatred for communists, for the state and its meddling. Eventually, even in America, he grows increasingly disillusioned with the state's involvement in the free market. His ideology is comparable to that of the modern American perversion of libertarianism, which is I think most prominently represented by Ayn Rand, for example. This kind of no handout, no handouts, no charity. Each man must earn his own lot in life. Nobody should expect a handout. Right. The sacredness of property ownership, even when oftentimes property is gained through illegitimate means and state authority and really anything but the person's
and an important note about Ryan
creation.
As a Russian nobleman, he was gifted land by the Tsar, and in Russian feudalism, legally the peasants or the serfs were attached to the land. So when somebody new bought land, the serfs came with it. So technically, when noble people were offering serfs for sale who were skilled coachmen or whatever in the newspapers, they were technically breaking the law. The main distinction between serfdom and slavery is that, and that serfs could be conscripted, and generally slaves don't, because they tend to have reasons not to be loyal, and if they're brought in from somewhere else, which is not the case with Russian serfs, they are mostly indigenous to the land they're on, they go back to their home country, and all of a sudden, if you're attacking their home country, you have your slaves turned soldiers to get turned enemy soldiers. It's the main reason Russian serfs were conscripted and slaves generally aren't. But yeah, they're given land. They allowed them to ruthlessly parasitize the people who did the actual work. Lords, when feudalism is working ideally, they do important tasks. They administrate justice, adjudicate disputes, organize the defense. Those are important. When they organize the defense of attacking another place and taking that, that's a parasitic relationship. And Ryan screamed incessantly about parasites. Irony is quite stunning. And
the hypocrisy is quite stunning there, and all the talk of parasites when you are, living through the support of state authority, essentially the protection of state authority, your rights to property are based on state authority and that kind of thing, and then you're railing against the state for essentially wanting to protect its own interests and remaining stable by not letting people starve and revolt, right? That's essentially what the basic social services in places like America are for, right? There is a certain minimum without which a society simply cannot function, which we will see with the further development of Rapture. Before I go to Rapture, this whole talk of handouts and free markets and parasitism is also very reminiscent of figures like Elon Musk or Peter Thiel, for that matter, who, of course, were able to grow successful businesses through massive government subsidies, right? At the same time, railing against their competitors, getting any kind of government subsidies. They will happily lobby the government to declare anybody a terrorist who, for example, burns a Tesla Cybertruck or vandalizes a Tesla Cybertruck, which, okay, that's a crime, but
technically vandalism with political motivation is the specific list in the State Department's description of terrorism, so yeah, technically they're correct. It's a different level than murdering hundreds of civilians at a time, but it is still a form of terrorism. Okay. If it's not applied to white nationalists doing these kind of things, then we have a problem.
I mean, be that as it may, the demand for disproportional government involvement when it is in their interest versus the talk of free markets and that kind of thing when it's not, it reflects a lot about modern society.
And another prime example of this, Elon lobbying the government to treat vandalism of cars he made as terrorism. That's one thing. Charles Koch, who big oil billionaire. His father built the family fortune by making oil refineries for the Soviet Union when Stalin was in charge. Funny, Libertarian got their money that way, right?
Yeah.
He's, in addition to the oil industry fundamentally being dependent on subsidies, both of the monetary form and of the, want to build a pipeline, people living over it don't want it. So you call in sheriff's departments from completely different states. Best one was Dane County from Wisconsin. That's the county the state capital's in. Super liberal place. And they went and put their sheriff's department on a Native American reservation in North Dakota. That didn't last long. Sheriff won't get reelected if he does that too long. But he also is so upset about state interference against his right to pollute the air that other people breathe. And he's ideologically spent more money fighting the charges for doing that and trying to deny the government's right to punish that as a crime than he would have if he just paid the fine and knocked it off.
Yeah. Yeah.
Great Behind the Bastards episode about Charles Koch, by the way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, so many different examples, not to mention. Yeah, I mean, then lobbying the president to basically advertise his products on the side of Elon Musk, or working with all kinds of different state governments in surveillance technology, talking about Palantir and Peter Thiel's consistent lobbying against data protection laws. So it should be very clear that the kind of freedom that is being advocated here is a very specific kind of freedom, right?
Yeah,
that is relegated to a very, very small minority.
Yeah, it sounds increasingly like theocrats screaming about freedom and against abortion and gay marriage at the same time. Words have meanings, and these people don't understand that. The concept of words having meanings.
Yeah, at the risk of being accused of being a communist, which for the record I am not, I will read a couple of quotes from the Communist Manifesto pertaining to this, because I thought they were very relevant. And do forgive me, those are not verbatim quotes. I have them from memory and I translated them from German, but the basic ideas are what matters here. So here goes, quote. We communists were accused of wanting to abolish the hard worked for property of workers. The property which forms the very basis of all personal freedom, work, and independence. Created or personally earned property. Is the talk of property is the talk of the property of the simple citizen. The kind of ownership that preceded the capitalist bourgeoisie class. We don't need to abolish it. The Industrial Revolution already abolished that and is continuously abolishing what remains of it on a daily basis. Does wage labor create property for the worker? Not at all. It creates capital, the property which exploits the work. It can only increase by means of creating new wage labor and thereby exploiting other wage laborers. Fundamentally, capital is a communal product by its very nature. It can only be moved collectively by the members of society. Capital is thus not a personal but a societal force. Thus, the capital doesn't lose its individual character through collectivization, only its service of the interests of a specific class. So what exactly are you accusing us of? Of wanting to abolish a type of property which requires for its existence that the vast majority of citizens do not or cannot have it. And then later in the same chapter, there's quite a bit of talk about state-run collectivization and monopolization, things that that have been tried out and have had some catastrophic results. And as I said, there is quite a bit that I think is misplaced in terms of the ideology. But I think, certain ideas they speak very well to problems that we still have in our modern society.
Yeah, and this is an example of institutions getting their own power. And the state taking over a corporation does not change the fact that the corporation still has its own power. You replace the guy in charge. The new guy from the Communist Party still runs it for his own benefit, and often less competently, and without the need to do things efficiently.
I mean, that's kind of a problem with revolutionaries a lot of the time, right? There's this kind of imagined scenario where, once you get rid of the people currently in charge and you put new people in charge, people who have maybe experienced oppression and were involved in the fight for liberation, then everybody's going to be equal, and this class distinction will simply dissolve. Unfortunately, history does not show that, right? What happens more often than not is the victors of the fight, just like in any war, civil war or not, as long as the structures remain the same, end up just taking on the same roles as the old oppressors, and the fundamental class structures don't change. And I think that's what happened with the Soviet experiment, for example, and
they also got new problems like treating workers who show up late too much as traitors, declaring that a form of sabotage against the state. That's a little excessive, to say the least. And that they're given whatever resources they need, and sometimes this ended up being resources, meaning kulaks or whoever the new enemy was, to go mine gold, and they're not getting enough food, you'll get more. It's completely horrifying and ultimately super inefficient.
Yes, the reason that I introduced this quote is just simply to make the point that property does not exist in a vacuum. It does not exist in anarchy, right? And the further development of the of the society in Rapture kind of shows that. So Andrew Ryan was convinced that the Cold War will soon culminate in a nuclear apocalypse. So he secretly has a city built under the Atlantic Ocean to eventually rise again and build anew after the end. In the meantime, his vision was that of a true free market utopia that should remain completely secret and isolated from the world. He handpicks a number of people. People move in, and a lot of them either have nothing to lose, or some of them just have a lot to invest and want to build something new there. At a certain point, another entrepreneur named Frank Fontaine discovers this city and offers to come in and basically build a build a fishing business in Rapture. Basically, they have submarines that collect fish, and they use it to feed the population. Right? They sell the fish to people and so on. And throughout the story, Andrew Ryan has building up resentment against Fontaine because he is suspected of smuggling goods from the outside world, which he sees as an existential threat to Rapture. He also Frank Fontaine.
The irony, right?
Yes. Eventually, he even starts imposing the death penalty for people who smuggle anything from the outside. For a long time, he's not able to find any definitive proof of Fontaine's smuggling. Fontaine has also another project with a few of his scientists where they discover a species of sea slug that can produce this the substance that they can use to produce plasmids and manipulate the human genome, as I described before, give you all kinds of powers, also highly addictive. But the slugs don't produce much of this material on their own. They work best with a human host, as it turns out that the best human hosts for those slugs are young girls. With the lack of a social safety net and the poverty wages and the pauperism that workers very quickly find themselves in Rapture, as you can imagine, a lot of children become orphaned and they have no place to go, and so Fontaine builds an orphanage for exactly this purpose, for implanting parasitic sea slugs into those little girls and having them produce massive amounts of atoms to sell to the population. Atom is very highly addictive. Yeah, when people get used to functioning with it, they simply can't function without it. Especially when they don't have enough girls to produce this substance, and there isn't enough of a supply. A lot of those addict splicers, as they are called, go completely insane and start to randomly kill people in hopes of being able to harvest atom from them. Another development that happens is that the little sisters, as they are called, are pair bonded with prisoners, essentially, people in the custody of the Rapture authorities, and so the little sisters, in order to collect more atom, actually go around Rapture and take it from dead bodies. And then you have the big daddies that are supposed to protect them, right? As Fontaine's business becomes bigger and bigger and takes more and more control of Rapture, that very much worries Andrew Ryan, and especially with the spread of certain plasmids that give people extraordinary powers, such as teleporting. Andrew tries to threaten and negotiate with Fontaine, and none of that works. Eventually, he just decides, fuck it, we're gonna go and raid the place, and we are basically going to take over that guy's business, right?
Was he wanting to take it over or to stop the addictive drugs causing people to die in the streets and attack others to stop hitting the market? Which was the goal there?
Yeah, so the drugs were part of it. Another part of it was the smuggling, which Andrew Ryan was sure was happening, but was never able to prove, right? As far as the drugs go, initially there is rhetoric about playing all of this down and so on, but then Ryan takes over the business and starts profiting from the atom production and continues basically doing the same thing. During this raid, Frank Fontaine dies, or so it seems. As it turns out, he had a plan with one of his scientists to create a perfect body double through plastic surgery. So they killed his body double, and then he changed his appearance again and took on a new identity of Atlas. Atlas essentially presented himself as a communist revolutionary, right? Which, as we know from the history of Fontaine, is, well, he's a cynic. He's more than anything. It doesn't seem that he has either free market or communist sympathies. Or he's an agent of chaos and just wants to take as much control as possible, as it would seem. So what Atlas essentially does is he recruits a lot of those splicers, a lot of those mutated human beings with strange powers, and it's essentially starting a communist revolution of sorts. And of course, Andrew Ryan employs his own splicers, and And so you have something of a full-on civil war from there on. So this is basically where the game starts, right? Your main character Jack comes in. He thinks he's coming in through a plane crash. As it turns out, the origins of Jack, he was the child of Andrew Ryan. He was the product of Andrew Ryan and his mistress, who he impregnated without wanting to, and afraid to tell him, and like wanting to be freed from this kind of situation. One of the scientists of Fontaine, back before he was killed, or apparently killed, was had offered her some money for the fetus. So they extract the fetus, they condition it with their special technology to respond to certain code phrases, to obey certain orders, and to die on command, essentially. Yeah. So this is Andrew Ryan's son. They also accelerate his growth and give him false memory, that kind of thing. So later on, Atlas triggers the return of Jack to kill Andrew Ryan. And this is basically the plot of the game. You go through Rapture, you fight with those big daddies, and then you're able to harvest those sea slugs from inside of the girls, killing them, and gaining a lot of Adam, and so you have more powers through that. Or as one of the former scientists of Fontaine has made it her mission and asked Jack to spare the girls, take some of the external or leaking kind of Adam from them and gain some power. But yeah, so Dr. Tannenbaum was essentially the mastermind behind the project initially, but later on became sympathetic to the girls and wanting to protect them.
Yeah, and so it should be lost on nobody that this libertarian project, first of all, the libertarians, the danger that children get exposed to because they believe in solely individual rights is always stunning. Case in point, these little sisters, and that these big daddies have their free will stripped from them to actually protect the girls who are not being protected enough.
Exactly. One of the most chilling scenes towards the end of the game is essentially when you go to kill Andrew Ryan, and you discover that there's this code phrase, would you kindly, kind of implanted into him so that every time Atlas speaks to him and asks him to kindly do something, is basically programmed to do it. And then, Andrew Ryan comes with this kind of line towards the very end. The difference between a man and a slave. A man chooses and a slave obeys. And then, to make his point, I guess, he orders Jack to kill him. And you as the player, it's very curious because you have this illusion of free will as a player, not only as, the character in the game, but also, as the person playing, you're supposed to be given a sort of, like in most games, this feeling of having control is exaggerated even when you know that there is actually one direction that this plot can go in. Right? I have to go here, do this and that. You can't do things in a random order. You can't, you have open world games, but even they have like a certain structure. So this is what most games do, kind of give you a sort of illusion of freedom. BioShock seeks to break this illusion in a lot of ways, right? Towards the end, yeah. You're being told what to do, and essentially if you want to play the game, you have no choice but to obey the orders that are given to you. So yeah, that's another very interesting angle to that game, I think.
Yeah, although at least in BioShock, you can choose whether to save the little sisters or to harvest them.
Yes, and
which has different results.
Yeah, and so far that is a meaningful choice. It will lead to a different ending, and I have a different relationship with the little sisters as a result. But yeah, I mean, I think that both BioShock and BioShock Infinite reflect different aspects of American identity, American political philosophy, things that make America uniquely America, right? And you might get the impression at first, be it with Comstock, religious cults, talking about Mormonism, that kind of thing, or Andrew Ryan and his fundamentalist free market ideology, that there is something of a targeted ideological critique here. But I think that's only true to a limited extent. More broadly, whether it's American exceptionalism, capitalist fundamentalism, or even liberation ideologies, say like communism, are all treated in a very dystopian manner that way. And a good example of that that I will circle back to here in BioShock Infinite was this character Daisy Fitzroy. Yeah. So Daisy Fitzroy was a black woman employed as a servant to the Comstock family, and she was basically blamed for the murder of Lady Comstock. She ended up escaping, and she formed the liberation or the communist group, the Vox Populi, who are basically a collective of workers and racial minorities and people who are systematically mistreated in Colombia to revolt and create a new order. I think something that really speaks to the the more general corrupting nature of rigid ideologies, different in their natures as they might be, is in this scene where Booker and Emily travel to yet another dimension in which there was another Booker DeWitt who died for the cause of the Vox Populi. Yes. When Daisy Fitzroy sees him, she says this: "My Booker DeWitt died for the Vox Populi. You are either an imposter or a ghost. My Booker DeWitt was a hero to the cause, a story to tell your children. You just complicate the narrative." Which, you know what that reminded me of? It reminds me of a lot of the old Soviet writings about social democracy. It reminds me of the kind of talk about social democracy being a mechanism for the capitalist state to survive by making it so that workers essentially suffer less and are less driven to revolt. And if you have humans at the center of your worldview, well, isn't that something you should want? Right? It's not. I mean, if you are now rooting for human suffering and pauperism so that a communist revolution might be possible, then, well, what are you doing this for?
Yeah.
Right.
And to say nothing of how many of the future Soviet leaders actively wanted the Russian Empire to lose, get invaded by Germany, because that would aid their goals. And that ended up being a big split in the left that the feminist movements went when they saw that goal. Their immediate response was, how many women are you going to allow to be raped for your goals? It just didn't fly with them.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But willing to let your own people face an invader, not only without a military to keep them from being invaded, but also that they probably wouldn't have weapons themselves and be completely helpless is also not a good look.
Yes, yeah. So certainly that speaks to this say Marxist Leninist and well generally ideological approach of well a narrative over people, right? It doesn't only exist in leftist movements, right? We talked about this kind of thing with Daenerys to some degree, especially a slightly different but an also related phenomenon, right? Where the ends end up justifying any means possible.
Which
And when
Book
the Vox
Daenerys was a
Populi
lot less like
actually
that.
get their hands when the Vox Populi actually get their hands on like upper class children, and they brutalize them. When the children of the oppressors they are punished for what they might become when they grow up. When you start to marginalize the group that was previously dominant, at the latest, then it becomes perfectly clear that what's happening is not a disintegration of class divides. It's just role switching.
Yeah, and I mean, Book Daenerys, she took in a bunch of pages from upper class families in Marine.
Mm.
A couple of her advisors, when they faced trouble from the Sons of the Harpy, wanted them killed, and Daenerys couldn't bring herself to do it, neither could Sir Barristan. They were both unwilling to murder children. And ironically, they were outsiders, and it was the people from the city who were pressuring them to kill the children of the great slaving families.
Well, yeah, I mean that's where kind of I would say more well-placed idealism starts, but as you see, also another spoiler warning for Game of Thrones that towards the end she doesn't have problem with with massacring civilians and children.
Yeah,
Um,
but that was show Daenerys. That was not book Daenerys.
okay, yeah, because well, when it becomes personal, it stops being ideological, and that's another dimension to this. Um, so yeah,
I don't think book Daenerys is going to actually do that. Should George R. R. Martin actually release The Winds of Winter? But yes.
Yeah, I mean, if George R. R. Martin finishes writing those books, we'll see if that happens. I'm gonna eat my shoe. All right. So that was a look into the world of BioShock and BioShock Infinite. I think it brings a lot of fascinating material about moral dilemmas and political dilemmas and the darkest manifestations of human nature, even when it is expressed through the prisms of vastly different ideologies. I think the common thread is very clearly seen here. Right. Benjamin, is there more you'd like to say about this reversion of libertarianism in your country and yeah, I mean you talked about Comstock as a historical figure, which seemed like at least a partial inspiration to the Zachary Comstock in the game. When it comes to Andrew Ryan, I think at least to some degree it probably he probably was based on Ayn Rand and her thinking, even if expressed in a somewhat more extreme manner. It is it's a stream of thought that has been growing since then, and I'm sure some rich bastard has tried some crazy idea like that, if not at this colossal scale. Do you have more to say on the history of this topic in the United States?
In the U.S., we had the Freetown Project, a movement to establish libertarian principles, started in Grafton, New Hampshire. I also had a roommate who was from New Hampshire and was a libertarian. New Hampshire is known as the live free or die state. That is the state motto. In Grafton, in particular, in the colonial period, the British wanted to claim specific trees to become masts for Royal Navy ships. The people who lived there refused. They ran off tax collectors. They refused to recognize claims by the Royal Navy to the tallest trees to make the masts of warships. Probably not coincidentally, they weren't dependent on trade. They're largely self-sufficient, so taking their trees to make Navy ships to protect commerce, not so important to them. It's also this reputation that people from New Hampshire and Vermont, there had been big kerfuffles about whether Grafton could become part of Vermont or not. Vermont was an independent country after the Revolution. You couldn't give those people orders when they were in the army. They are excellent shots. Giving them orders was extremely hard. But in Grafton, if you fast forward a few centuries, there's talk of having libertarians move to a place. One of the people in Grafton was John Babiars. He was the volunteer fire chief. Described the volunteer fire department as mutual aid. And since he already lived there, he said we should all move to where I already live. Population of Grafton was about 1,100. About 200 libertarians moved in. They were mostly men, mostly single, had a lot of strong opinions and a lot of guns. Turns out people who want to be left alone don't always like anyone moving there, even if it's people who also are intent on making everyone get left alone. Especially when you have one of the people moving in was Larry Pendarvis, who, when he showed up at meetings, eventually people Googled him and found out that, according to the New Republic here, in a write-up they made of a book called A Libertarian Walks into a Bear. Haven't read it, but I sure want to. Larry Pendarvis wrote that he wanted to create a space honoring the freedom to traffic organs, the right to hold duels, and the God-given underappreciated right to organize so-called bum fights. And he also bemoaned the persecution of the victimless crime of consensual cannibalism. And I gotta wonder, are these duels, and if anyone actually wants to receive an organ from a bum who's paid to fight another bum, this idea that the people who die in duels then have their organs trafficked.
Yeah.
And does the winner of the duel get to eat the loser? And that he wrote about that makes you think he actually wanted to engage in cannibalism. That he said was that insistent about it.
Quite the utopian vision there.
Yeah. And I mean, sure, you can make an argument that a bum fight isn't fundamentally different from a boxing match, except the boxers have trained for it, and you have insurance and so on, so they get medical care for their injuries.
Well, you can make the argument that they're both exploitative, however.
Yeah. And that people who are training for it want to do it. That every MMA...
I think it's also important to draw some practical distinctions between paying people to do those kind of extremely dangerous tasks for because they're extremely desperate and don't really otherwise have means to survive, and doing it in say a more dignified way. Now whatever your opinion on this specific issue, like the legalization of prostitution in Germany might be, I think it is nonetheless sensible that we do have laws against the predatory kind of prostitution that, you know, uh, okay, let me put it in a different way because you can make an argument that all of them are, but if you see somebody who's clearly hungry, who's clearly homeless, who's, clearly in need, and they're offered some of their basic needs in exchange for sexual services, and they don't really have other means to support themselves, and basically financially coerce them in that way. That is illegal, right? And I would put bum fights in that kind of category.
Well,
Um,
obviously,
right.
I'm talking about from the perspective of the sort of libertarians who live in yurts.
Yeah.
And yeah, and the organ trafficking, cannibalism, and bum fights, that wasn't the end of why people didn't like Larry Pendarvis. He
Mhm.
eventually had to go move to Texas, bringing his mail order Filipino bride business with him. Which, yeah, what's the distinction between mail order bride and prostitution? There's definitely
One
not a
of
clear
them's more
line there.
permanent, though. I mean,
Yeah,
what's the difference between marriage and prostitution? There's, I mean, of course, you could draw differences, and depending on the cultural background and whether payments are part of the cultural tradition here and there, and how much autonomy the woman has, and how big of a role does the money really play, or in some cultures it's more symbolic than anything, you know. So of course, it's complex, and I'm not saying all marriage is prostitution, but where is the line between marriage and prostitution? It's
yeah,
not a very easy question to ask, actually.
indeed. And I'd need to re-listen to all the podcasts. I primarily researched this by listening to a bunch of podcasts about the Freetown project. Links in our notes. They were all quite interesting. But one of these people, without listening again, I can't confirm that it was Pendarvis, but I think it was. Also, has since the movement failed, started a podcast and talked about how the state shouldn't be interfering in the right of minors to have sex with adults. I would like him to not be using our medium, but unfortunately, the nature of the medium stops us from kicking him off. But yes, and so a mail order bride business owner having such an opinion, I'm shocked, especially in light of cannibalism. And there was a Larry Pendarvis who has child porn convictions. I wasn't quite able to confirm it was the same guy. There are more Larry Pendarvises than I would expect. There are also several firemen by that name. Long obituary for one of them. But yes, I think it's the same guy. I just can't completely prove it. And the libertarian movement libertarian movements always have quite a problem with pedophiles showing up in them. And yeah, the way libertarianism does not protect children, it's certainly one of the biggest arguments against it. But then, in addition to the personal problems and libertarianism, like Nazism, surprisingly, both have surprisingly big tents. A lot of people believe a lot of different things you wouldn't expect to be in the same movement, whether libertarianism or totalitarian movements. But as far as how they actually ran the town, despite being less than a fifth of the population, they were able to get the town budget cut by 30%. That meant that their potholes, domestic disputes, and violent crime all spiked. And the government office temperatures plummeted because they had to save money by not heating their offices. In New Hampshire, which does not benefit from the Gulf Stream. It can be a very cold place.
Yeah.
My roommate actually lived in a house without solid walls. It was kind of scary. We'd be in the house before our heaters got started. Our breaths would mist in front of our faces, and he'd be wearing shorts and a t-shirt because that was normal to him. This is not okay. And of course, to bring it all full circle, Bobby Harris eventually got vilified because the fire chief, wasn't letting people have unsecured fires on high fire danger days. And most libertarians will say when the effects of what you're doing goes off your property line, and when they start a forest fire, all of a sudden shouldn't happen. But sort of people coming to a town and live in yurts because all these young men, some of them had money, drove up cost of real estate, others were living in yurts, hence the violent crime, the drugs, and that makes everything dangerous. But the most stunning part of this whole project, they also believed in not stopping people from feeding the bears. There was one particular woman known as Donut Lady. She started feeding birds and started putting out food for the bears to keep them from taking her bird feed, and eventually ended up being about she'd feed bears a dozen donuts per day, which I have to say is the most ridiculous example of feeding animals that aren't your pets I've heard of, other than for our guests, Pawpaw's brothers here. My neighbors would feed his brothers and sisters entire chickens to keep them up from walking on their cars. Neighbors were not rich. That was, yeah, most ridiculous example of feeding animals. Other than that, and of course, when you feed bears,
do you think that they understand this quid pro quo here? Like, we give you a chicken, you don't walk on car, okay? Yeah, we understand.
Yeah, of course the cats didn't understand. And when they were so happy when I eventually brought most of them to either the Charlotte Cat Smart Coalition, brought most of them either to the barn, and most of the ones that weren't brought to the barn, I brought to the Humane Society. But they really liked having one left to eat their lizards, which, is another thing I disagree with them about, but that's neither here nor there. But yes, poor people, man, still doing construction work in his 70s, having to wear a belt most of the time for his back, was giving stray cats entire roasted chickens. Apparently, putting it in our yard, kept the cats from going in his. And when I say our yard, I mean the yard of a house that was abandoned next to
How does that tie back to libertarianism and the Freetown project?
Yeah, it doesn't. I just thought it was funny.
Okay.
But aside from that, I may be
there?
guilty of this too because of my cats. Now I got the ones currently curled up on my bed.
So what happened with the bear problem?
Huh?
What happened with the bear problem?
Oh, yeah, so the bears getting habituated to humans. Well, turned out people who weren't Donut Lady, when they got bears showing up in the yards, would sometimes throw firecrackers at them and stuff. Turns out bears kind of have trouble understanding the difference. One of them was so habituated they went and ate someone's kittens. 3 kittens, and all of a sudden had 1 because a bear ate 2 in front of her. And no one was willing to tell this. Well, no. New Hampshireites in general don't cross their property lines without an invitation. You don't do that. My friend's neighbor shot a gun off in the air when he did that, going after a ball, and they knew each other. He also repeatedly had guns pulled out on him when his father was proselytizing, but they actually have pretty low rates of gun violence despite that. And the top place libertarians were getting taking over. They weren't willing to tell people not to feed bears on their private property. But when they started having bear attacks, a bunch of these libertarians then had started doing bear hunts, which were illegal. And all the state wildlife agency was really able to tell them was, that's illegal, don't do it. They weren't actually able to stop them. And, there's victim blaming going on. And they killed a few dozen bears. Turns out that didn't make much of a difference when they can have 2 cubs per year. And there's a population of hundreds. Killing 12 doesn't make a difference. But eventually, the Donut Lady talked to a lawyer to stop getting harassed. She did not give her name. No one really printed her name at all, nor would I repeat it.
By people or by bears?
Huh? Stop being harassed by people for feeding the bears, and then her lawyer explained to her why they need to not have people feeding bears, and she stopped. It's amazing.
Okay. But she didn't sue the bears.
No, she did not sue the bears. Her problem was people trying to stop her from feeding the bears. And then when a lawyer, because apparently it had to be a lawyer explaining it to her, explained to her why she shouldn't do that, she stopped. Problem solved.
So how did this whole...
The bears got dehabituated to humans when there was no longer people feeding them, and when the trash disposal services were reinstated, because the libertarians, of course, thought that the free market would fix that problem. Also, it's people's God-given right, apparently, to pile up trash on their own property.
So that's how this project ended, yeah?
Yeah, I assume John Babiaris still lives there, but most of the rest moved out. They're tired of having people living in yurts. And there's a whole movement for a free state project to have libertarians from all over the country move into New Hampshire. Also, it's like they agreed that people would sign an agreement to move there once they got a certain number of signatures, then they'd all move.
I think there are a lot of parallels with Rapture here, for sure, and I think this is also a good place to wrap this episode up. But
there was no smuggling into Grafton, though. No one was executed for smuggling.
Sure. Yeah, but
one important note.
Statism from this side and that. Yeah. So.
But one other important note about all the libertarian responses to bear attacks. When they did their bear hunts, they never violated anyone's private property. They always got permission first, which led to hilarious conversations with the people who had libertarians showing up asking if they could hunt bears on their property, and journalists.
Hunt bears and journalists.
Oh, no, journalists had hilarious conversations with property owners about libertarians asking to hunt bears.
Yeah. I think... I think things like the trash piling up, the drug problems, and that kind of thing, those are the parallels, obviously. Neither the bears nor the smugglings are common lines here. But before I wrap this up, I think one very important point that I would like to mention, I think I've mentioned it in a previous show, but I think it bears repeating. Libertarianism, as it is understood in the modern day United States, that's not an ideology. It's not a coherent framework of thought. It's not even a failed or dysfunctional ideology, right? Marxism, Leninism, fascism, Islamism. I think of all of those as dysfunctional ideologies. Now, this conception of libertarianism, first of all, does not have any intellectual basis upon which it is built. It is entirely built upon knee-jerk reactions to things that certain people don't like. Taxation is theft because I don't like it in certain instances, even though it's going to serve me in others, and so on. Actually, it is a perversion of what was originally coined as an understanding of libertarian by a French socialist named Joseph de Jacques, and it was further developed by another French thinker. Forgive me for the pronunciation. His name was Proudhon, and it basically forms the basis for what we today more commonly call anarchism, which, contrary to popular intuition, anarchism and chaos are actually, or at least seem to me to be, kind of opposites in a lot of ways. Because one thing that actually, I think some people who call themselves libertarians, say like Peter Thiel, and others who will openly call themselves fascists, will often repeat is this idea of a natural hierarchy, right? That human beings kind of naturally organize themselves in hierarchy, and especially in times of difficulty. What requires deliberate and constant effort is equality and the constant dismantlement of this hierarchy. And this is kind of the contrast between a line of thought that rejects community organizing fundamentally and one that rejects undue authority. An anarchist that is well adjusted and has a basic understanding of those ideas will recognize that without state authority, private property as we understand it cannot exist. We need to organize capital collectively in a manner that serves everybody, and constantly deconstruct the naturally occurring authoritarian structures in our society, and have as far as is possible a decentralized manner of governing ourselves and sharing things equitably. Anarchism is a subcategory of socialism. You cannot be an anarchist or a libertarian without being a socialist, right? People who talk about anarcho-capitalism, anarcho-libertarianism, either they are intentionally obfuscating an ideology that they know is unpalatable to their audience, or they are simply out of their minds. So this is what I have to say to American libertarianism as is perpetuated, especially in recent times. And I wish this term and this label would completely disappear. Because to be clear, I'm not making an argument that, well, because this is the original definition that, the original libertarian thinkers gave to this word, then this is the only possible correct connotation that it can have. Now, language can evolve, right? Semantics can evolve. Meanings of words can change. The problem is that when you actually use this word in this sense, there is no reference that this lexeme is referring to in the real world. Essentially, it doesn't have a meaning, and so this is why I say it's not libertarianism. It's not anything. It's not an ideology. It's not a stream of thought. And let's just abandon it as a society. It's not worth engaging with any further. Ben, do you have any final words other than that?
Yeah, and I think it should be lost on no one how many American libertarians are working very closely with theocrats.
Mm-hmm.
They clearly supporting Republicans and say libertarianism plot to take over and leave you the hell alone. Well, if you're working with people who want to impose religious laws on society, you are not doing that. And I think one of the best explanations for this lies in the Dangerous History podcast actually talked about it. Any political party is going to be an alliance of control freaks and banksters. On the right, it's very obvious. Mitt Romney, Koch brothers are banksters. They want people's money. They don't care what people do in the privacy of their own homes very much. Mitt Romney changes positions. I think his true belief is he doesn't care how much gay sex is happening. He just wants to get money. And then Rick Santorum, very obvious control freak. He does care what people do in the privacy of their own homes. They're the alliance between people who may espouse libertarian views but want to get economic control with people who want social control. It's less obvious in the Democratic Party. It is there too. We do not want to let people talking about economic freedom work with theocrats. Even if they fight each other later, we all lose our freedom that way.
Santorum, ew. Yeah. So that being said, thank you so much for your time, Benjamin. It was really fun having this conversation with you. It was quite enlightening, and I'm sure there's more we could have explored in BioShock, but yeah, we need to keep a certain time frame here, and I do hope I am going to be able to release this by the new year. If not,
not Orthodox Christmas.
Okay, fine. So, yeah, if not, I do hope you guys understand why. Yeah. Both of us are working more than one job. I am studying
Today,
full time as well,
yeah.
and we are actually carrying quite a major share of costs for this podcast as well. We would love to be able to release more often and to improve the quality of our work and talk about more things here. So if you would like to support us in doing that, do consider checking out our Patreon. You can get early access to some of our content over there. If you become a patron, starting from €5 a month. You may also make a one-time donation through PayPal, all of which, of course, is going to be in the show notes. Like I said, that will be immensely helpful, and also 50% of the proceeds will go directly to supporting refugees in need and helping them get to safety. Benjamin himself, as we have discussed on a previous show, has invested a lot of his personal income in bringing us to the United States after having gone through a lot of hardship due to being a gay former Muslim, and you can check our episode on that right now if you would like. But we would like to do more of that as well. Help more people, bring you more content. So please do consider making a donation here or becoming a patron. We would really appreciate it. Otherwise, depending on where you are and what your situations are, really understand if that isn't practicable for you. Do follow the show on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, wherever you are listening. We have a YouTube channel where some content will be released that is not released here. We also have Facebook and Instagram, where sometimes shorter format content is released from those podcasts. So yeah, check us out everywhere and follow us and like this video, or if you're watching it on YouTube, comment and engage. That would be immensely helpful. Thank you so much for listening. If you have been staying with us for all of this time, have a wonderful day, have a wonderful evening, take care of yourself, stay safe, and goodbye.